Hey there. I've been doing some research on the history of Alberta lately, and it's absolutely fascinating. Did you know that Alberta has a rich history, especially when it comes to its Indigenous peoples?
Absolutely. Alberta's history is quite diverse and complex, with Indigenous peoples playing a central role. Where would you like to start our discussion?
Well, I think it's crucial to begin with the Indigenous peoples who have inhabited the region for thousands of years. The first Indigenous groups in what's now Alberta were the First Nations, including the Cree, Blackfoot, and Assiniboine, to name a few. They had a deep connection to the land, living off its resources and developing unique cultures and traditions.
That's right. Each Indigenous group had its own distinct way of life and social structure. The Blackfoot, for example, were nomadic buffalo hunters, while the Cree were known for their skill in trapping and trading fur. It's amazing to think about how these diverse cultures coexisted and adapted to the challenging environment of Alberta.
Absolutely. And speaking of adaptation, let's not forget the role of Indigenous knowledge and technology in surviving Alberta's harsh climate. They developed ingenious techniques for hunting, fishing, and shelter construction. For example, the Cree invented the birch bark canoe, which was instrumental for transportation and trade.
Right, and let's not forget about the impact of European contact on Alberta's Indigenous peoples. The arrival of fur traders and settlers in the late 18th century brought about significant changes. The fur trade, dominated by the Hudson's Bay Company and Northwest Company, led to the establishment of trading posts and the exchange of goods between Indigenous peoples and European traders.
True, but it's important to note that this contact wasn't always peaceful. There were conflicts, like the fur trade wars, which were a series of battles and skirmishes between rival fur trading companies and Indigenous groups. This period marked a shift in the dynamics of the region.
You're absolutely right, and the 19th century brought even more significant changes with the arrival of settlers and the Canadian government's push to expand westward. The signing of treaties with Indigenous peoples, like Treaty 7 with the Blackfoot Confederacy, marked a turning point.
Yes, those treaties played a critical role in shaping the relationship between Indigenous peoples and the Canadian government. They outlined certain rights and provided reserves for Indigenous communities, but sadly, they were often not fully honored, leading to significant injustices.
It's heartbreaking to think about the injustices and hardships that many Indigenous peoples faced during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The residential school system, for instance, had a devastating impact on Indigenous communities, as children were forcibly separated from their families and stripped of their culture and language.
That's a painful chapter in Alberta's history, for sure. The legacy of these policies still affects Indigenous communities today, with ongoing efforts for reconciliation and healing. But it's also important to highlight the resilience and strength of Indigenous peoples in the face of adversity.
Absolutely. Despite these challenges, Indigenous cultures have persevered and continue to thrive. Today, there's a resurgence of Indigenous languages, art, and traditions in Alberta, which is so heartening to see.
I couldn't agree more. And let's not forget that Alberta is home to numerous Indigenous nations, each with its own unique heritage. The Métis, for example, have a rich history of their own, with roots in both Indigenous and European cultures.
Yes, the Métis played a vital role in the history of Alberta, particularly in the fur trade and the development of the region. Their culture and traditions continue to be celebrated, and there is a strong Métis community in the province today.
It's great to see that Alberta's history is being celebrated and acknowledged in a more inclusive way now. Museums and cultural institutions are working to tell the story of Indigenous peoples alongside the broader history of the province.
Absolutely. It's important that we all learn about and respect the history and contributions of Indigenous peoples in Alberta. Their story is an integral part of the province's history, and understanding it is essential for building a more inclusive and just future.
I couldn't agree more. Alberta's history, with its Indigenous roots, fur trade era, and more recent developments, is a tapestry of stories that we should all take the time to explore and appreciate. It's a history that continues to shape the province and its people today.
Well said. Alberta's history is a testament to the strength and resilience of its Indigenous peoples and the diverse communities that have called it home over the centuries. It's a history worth celebrating and learning from.
Absolutely. And the more we learn and understand, the better equipped we are to contribute to reconciliation efforts and ensure a brighter future for all in Alberta. Thanks for this enlightening discussion.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure discussing Alberta's history with you. Let's continue to spread awareness and appreciation for this fascinating and diverse history.